As we create quick, early versions of our building model, it's quite common to use combined floor types. That's floors that include both layers that represent the subfloor assembly, as well as layers that represent the finished materials for the floor. But as we develop our model and increase the accuracy of the model of the floor, it's helpful to actually separate the floor into two different types. A floor type that represents only the subfloor layers, and a separate floor type that includes only the finished floor layers. This gives us the ability to apply different finished floors in specific rooms and have the same subfloor for the entire building. To create a type that includes only the subfloor layers, select an existing combined floor type in the Type selector, then click the Edit Type button. Next, you can click the Duplicate button and enter a name for the new type that represents what the subfloor is composed of. Click the Edit button on the Structure line in the Type Properties dialog, and the Edit Assembly dialog will open. That'll show you the floor layers that are defined, the materials, and the thicknesses. You can edit the layers in the subfloor assembly by deleting any of the finished layers, leaving only the subfloor layers. You can also change the materials assigned to each layer as needed, and set the thickness of each layer. Now, as you're creating subfloor types, you'll typically won't need to add very many layers. You'll often just delete the finished floor layers from an existing floor assembly. Next, we'll create a finished floor type. To do that, again, select one of the combined floor types in the Type selector. Again, click the Edit Type and click Duplicate and enter a name for the new type. Then click the Edit button on the Structure line so we can edit that assembly again. For the finished floor type, you'll typically edit the layers in this way. You'll move the finished layers that appear above the core boundary down, so they're within the core boundary. Every floor assembly needs to have some layers within the core boundary, and we're going to move the finished floor layers down to within that core boundary. Then we'll delete the layers that were associated with the subfloor assembly, leaving only the finished layers within that core boundary. Again, we can change the materials assigned to each of the different layers as needed, and set the thickness for each layer. After you've defined subfloor types and finished floor types, we can place them in the model. Now, when placing a finished floor type in your model, there are a couple important considerations to keep in mind. You don't want the finished floor type to overlap with the subfloor type. So as you place the finished floor type, you should set its height offset so that it floats above the subfloor. Set the finished floor's height offset to match the thickness of the finished floor type. That way it'll float just above the subfloor. You may also need to turn off the room bounding checkbox for the finished floor type. That's typically a good idea so that the finished floor won't interfere or create any problems when using analysis tools. So turn off that room bounding checkbox for the finished floor type, but leave it turned on for the subfloor types.